sit down and start trying. Get something on paper. If you feel comfortable, show it to some people, get some feedback, and just do it.
That was Jeffery Krull sharing his advice for new writers. Stay tuned to hear more about Jeff's journey as a writer on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We'll be back after the intro. Welcome to the Local Author Podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community and highlighting their unique voices and perspectives. Today's author guest is former director of the Allen County Public Library, Jeffery J.R. Krull. Jeff was born and grew up in North Tonawanda, New York. He graduated from North Tonawanda High School and went on to receive a B.A. in English from Williams College. After a short stint working for the phone company and a try at teaching, he earned his MLS degree from the University of Buffalo and started his career as a librarian and library administrator. He served libraries in Buffalo, Chillicothe, and Mansfield, Ohio, and Fort Wayne, Indiana. He is now retired and splits his time between Fort Wayne and Florida, where he spends as much time as he can on the beach. He volunteers for nonprofit organizations that promote education and public service. His first novel, which we are discussing today, Single Wing, a story of boyhood, friendship, and football, is a poignant coming-of-age tale about a group of high school friends who live for football in blue-collar upstate New York town. Set in the 1960s, it is a tale remarkably told in a voice that has the honesty and directness of J.D. Salinger. Jeff, welcome to Pages and Voices.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you today. So we're going to have you share a short reading from your book, but before I do, I'm going to tell our listeners a little more about it. Chris Simpson tells the story of growing up in gritty industrial upstate New York town in the 1960s, hanging out with a bunch of friends whose favorite pastimes are playing high school football, chasing girls, dreaming up nicknames, inventing imaginary organizations, and trying to get served in bars. Their football team, the Ganaway Rivermen, has historically won more than its fair share of games against arch-rival Belle Island. The Belle Island Ganaway game, the big game, is famous throughout the region, but that winning streak has come to an end. Frank Hellwig is the team's legendary coach. He's won more games than any coach in the league, maybe in the state. For all those years, Hellwig has relied on the single-wing offense, which by the 60s has been abandoned by all but a few schools. Is it time for a change? The team's losing streak against Belle Island has the town talking. People are saying that Hellwig needs to modernize the Ganaway game. But that talk seems to be falling on deaf ears. Chris and his teammates come up through the ranks, freshman ball, then the JV team, and finally varsity. Over those years, their families confront a series of issues: alcoholism, gambling, loan sharking, mob connections, a nasty injury at a chemical plant, and the possible loss of a family business. But always, football and friendship form the glue that holds the boys together, and in their senior year, it's up to them to save the reputation of the Ganaway Rivermen and their own sense of pride. Take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to read you the beginning of the book, a few paragraphs, then I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, just to give you the flavor of what it's going to be about. The air was always heavy with the smell of rotten eggs. Compliments of the two paper mills in town, located on the river. A very familiar smell. Somehow it was part of our identity. Something unpleasant that you lived with, a reality that defined the place. A feature of our gritty town that you just dealt with. Maybe it even made you feel tough and superior to the classy suburbs with their neat residential streets and strip malls, uncontaminated by smelly factories and slag heaps and power plants and coal yards. The practice field was across the street from the high school. There were separate fields for the varsity, junior varsity, and freshman teams. There were 2 fields for the varsity team, and of course they were the best shape. Actually had a fair amount of grass. The varsity team would alternate practice on their fields, one week on this, next on the other. Most of the grass in the center of the JV and freshman fields was completely gone, just mud with a fair amount of gravel mixed in. When I first looked out over that practice field as a member of the freshman football team, I remember feeling tremendously excited and scared to death. I always wanted to play football for Ganaway. It was a big deal in our town, One of my cousins played football, and when he made it to the varsity, I got to see some of his games when my uncle took me with him uptown on a Friday night to the stadium behind the high school. It was a cool stadium, I think the largest one in the area, and it was always full to overflowing, even the visitors' side. Parents and relatives of the players and high school kids acting cool, some of them smoking under the bleacher sections at either end of the concrete grandstand, and lots of townspeople who looked forward to the games as a welcome break from the tough, dirty, sometimes dangerous factories where they spent most of their waking hours. And just a bit more. Ganaway was not a rich city. Money for schools and parks and playgrounds, for everything, was always tight. And we were supposed to be tough and suck it up and not complain and do what we were told. We weren't pansies like the rich kids from Eastport or Parsons. Their equipment would certainly be the best and the latest. But equipment didn't win football games. To win, you had to be in shape, and you had to kick the you-know-what out of your opponent. You had to have your offense and defense drilled into your head until what you did on the field was done by instinct, second nature, without thinking about it. The football program had been shaped and led for 35 years by Coach Frank Helwig. His one lost record leading up to our freshman year was the best in the state. He had won 13 conference championships and had 9 undefeated seasons. Still, some people were starting to think that Frank's approach needed an update, that it was outmoded, too old school. Lots of comparisons with Woody Hayes, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But Helwig, who was born at the end of the 19th century, was actually quite a bit older than Woody, and his system was even more archaic than Woody's. Ganaway was one of only a handful of schools, high schools and colleges, that still used the single-wing offense. Mainly, it was raw power that Helwig believed in and that his teams relied on to win. As freshmen, we were taught that we didn't have to surprise our opponents. They might know what we're going to do, but that doesn't matter because we're just going to run over them. We're tougher than they are, and we have more guts and desire than they do. We know how to block. We know how to blow holes in their line. We have more passion. We have more fire. We want to win more than they do. Pain won't stop us. We'll crush them. We will grind them down. So that's the start. Okay.
Thanks for sharing.
All right.
So we are absolutely going to talk about the book. But first, were you an avid reader growing up?
I would say I was probably an average reader. I liked to read. Mm-hmm. I wasn't buried in a book all the time, but yeah, I like to read.
Sure. Did you have a favorite?
I was thinking about that. I read a lot of books by this guy, John R. Tunis. He's an old guy. He wrote in the 50s.
Like T-O-O, Tunis?
T-U-N-I-S.
T-U-N-I-S.
John R. Tunis.
Okay.
And he wrote books about sports, kids in sports, teenagers. I was probably reading these when I was, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
So that was something I remember. And then this was not a favorite book, but I remember my father reading to me Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah.
And somehow that kind of stuck with me. Even I was probably way too young for it.
Yeah.
But it was time I got to spend with him, and it was didn't have much time with my dad. He had his own business, and it was
right.
So anyway.
So it was memorable. It stuck out to you.
Memorable. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, were you an avid sportsman growing up then?
I was. Yeah. I played Little League baseball, but I really wanted to play football in high school, and as the narrator said, Chris, that's not really me, okay, but like Chris, I always wanted to play football, and I had a cousin who played, and so yeah, I got to high school, and I played freshman football. Then I played freshman basketball in the winter. Yes. Then I ran track.
Was this a small community?
No, our high school class had about 550.
Oh, that's sizable.
Kids in it. So I was always I was good enough to make the team, but I tended not to be the big star. Okay. A lot of bench warming, but I still played, and I was
Yeah.
really into it.
Absolutely. So, how much of this is autobiographical? I know the towns are made up, but then I read about Y.A. Tittle and the New York Giants and Sing Along with Mitch, which is a real thing because I went to YouTube and looked this Mitch Miller up, and I have to say, people's tastes sure have changed. I don't think he'd be on TV today. I would prefer Lawrence Welk to this gentleman. But anyways.
Kind of in the same genre. in a way.
Yeah, really. How much was autobiographical?
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that was an issue for me because I did base a lot of this on a group of friends I had. But I didn't want to make it autobiographical. I didn't want it to be a memoir.
You don't want to spill the beans on your friends?
Well, I'll talk about that too. Yeah, but so it's a novel, it's fiction, but there's an awful lot of, parallels and connections and such. So in the book, there's 6 tight friends. And in high school, we had kind of 6 tight friends. Then you got the next rank, the next group of friends. But these are the tight friends. And we all played sports, and we did kind of goofy things. And somehow or other, we got into this Mitch Miller thing. It was a TV show.
Yeah.
And my parents had an album, Mitch Miller. And,
I bet.
I forget whatever it was, Mitch Miller and the something or other.
Because he's backed up by all these young men.
Yes. He's got a chorus or whatever. So we actually listened to these crazy things, and then we started making up our own words for some of the songs.
I'm sure.
And that's in the book. We substituted stupid German words for some of the Mitch Miller lyrics.
You made it more fun.
And pretty stupid, but that's kind of the way we were.
That's all right. So the title of the book is Single Wing, and so I had to look that up because I was trying to figure out what single wing meant. And single wing is a type of offense football teams used to play. I guess it's had a few revivals here and there with high school amateur football, but it's not really run too much anymore. Can you explain what the single wing offense is?
Right. Back at the time this book is set in the 60s, you would see, if you watched football on TV and Y.A. Tittle, New York Giants quarterback, the center would snap the ball to the quarterback. The quarterback would be right up under the back end of the center, and that's where the thing would start, the play would start. Center snaps the ball to the quarterback hands it off to somebody or throws a pass or something like that.
Which is what we see today.
Like pretty much today, yeah.
Right.
The single wing, and I didn't know this when I went out for football, and neither does the narrator. The quarterback basically never touches the ball.
So interesting.
Yeah, because the center snaps the ball either to the tailback or the fullback. The quarterback is really just a blocking back. And then there's a wing back who sets up at the end of the line. So the whole point of this thing is that expecting to be a quarterback like Y.A. Tittle, it was quite a shock to get to play for Coach Hellwig's system and find out you're never going to get your hands on the ball as a quarterback. So,
do we know where that originated from? I didn't dig that deep into it. Like how long the single wing was around?
It was around. I mean, it was just fading out in the 60s. And like you said, it's come back a little bit. There's some high school teams using it now.
My husband, who's an avid sportsman, he's never heard of it. We were talking about it, and I was trying to explain it to him. I was like, you're going to have to look it up. All I know is the quarterback seems to be like in between.
That's right.
And it's not what you are used to.
The quarterback lines up more or less behind the right guard or tackle and then becomes the blocker.
And then there's 2 people back here, right?
There's 2 people behind the center.
Yeah.
And the center can snap it either to the tailback or the fullback. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just I couldn't make sense of it with what I see on TV today. So anyways, it was interesting to learn about. So this is a story about friendship as much as it is football. What was the catalyst for writing it?
Well, I can't tell you exactly when I started thinking about this. Probably, maybe even before I retired, which was 2014.
Okay.
And
it's been that long. Okay.
Yeah, it's
10
been
years.
a long time. And I had a good high school experience, and I had good friends, and we had this real loyalty to our hometown. And it was an industrial place, nothing fancy about it. And I just started thinking about this idea. I'd like to tell this story, about the town and about the big rivalry between North Tonawanda, that was where we lived, and Tonawanda.
Oh, okay.
These towns were across the Erie Canal from each other, right where the Erie Canal flows into the Niagara River.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it was a TNT game. That was the final game of the season, Tonawanda versus North Tonawanda. And I always thought, as I started thinking about this book, boy, that's like a dynamite title, It's explosive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
TNT, boom, So I start thinking about this, and I say, well, can I write a novel called TNT? I could kind of fictionalize all this stuff, but tell the story. And the more I thought about it, I said, no, I can't use TNT because I don't want it to be a memoir. I was gonna make up different names, Instead of Tonawanda, I was gonna call it Tannersville, and New Tannersville, TNT.
Sure.
So I couldn't do that. Actually, I started writing it with those names in it.
Okay.
And after I worked on it for probably a couple of years altogether, but after a few months of writing, I rethought that whole thing. I said, no, I got to come up with something else. This is getting to be too literal. I don't want it to be literal.
Right.
So that's when I came up with this. I wanted it to be like TNT, some memorable initialism. And so I thought, okay, we could have Bell Island and Ganaway, BIG game.
Oh, I got it now.
Game, okay?
I got it now. Okay.
It's corny, but
makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, I got onto that, and then of course I had to start, thinking about the geography couldn't be exactly the same. I didn't want to talk about Niagara Falls, but even though it was on the Niagara River, so I was come up with fake names for things. And
so you were trying to make it like your hometown, but not like your hometown.
Right, exactly. And that was all the way through it. That was a little bit of a challenge because, like I said, I didn't want it to be a memoir, but there were certain things about growing up that I did want to include in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the characters, as I mentioned, were pretty much based on friends of mine. Mm-hmm. The names were all, my friends were, two of them were second cousins, and none of that comes through in the book. I changed all that around.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
So did your friends read the book?
Yes.
Were they able to pick themselves out of the book?
I'll tell you a story about one friend in particular. I let him read it as I got into it a bit.
Yeah. Like sort of an editing eye or something?
Give me some feedback on this.
Yeah, sure.
And one of my friends said to me, okay, says, I like it. But he says, you better be careful.
Oh, no.
And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, did you ever read the book by Buzz Bissinger, Friday Night Lights? That's a book about the author went out to Odessa, Texas.
Right.
And it was about the high school football team and the whole community out there. Okay. Mm-hmm. That was not a novel. This was a nonfiction book. But what my friend told me was, he said, I read I think the second edition of that book, and in the intro, the author says he went out to Odessa, Texas to do a book talk, and people were really mad at him for the stuff he said about the town.
Because he spilled the tea?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right,
Don't.
Right.
But I got the message from him. Be careful. Don't make it too one-on-one. This guy is that person.
Right.
So I kept that in mind as I went through it.
That sounds smart.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So how long did it take you to write the book from beginning to end?
I think it took, and I say I think, because for a while I didn't let anybody know I was actually trying to write a book.
Kept it quiet.
And so I think it took about 2 years from the time I started really thinking about it and putting some words down on paper to wrapping it up.
So did you freehand this, or did you type this on Microsoft Word?
This was Word.
Okay.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
And this is something did I hear somewhere? I think I watched another talk of yours that your wife was off busy doing her own thing, and you were on the patio with your laptop, or at the beach with your laptop while she's enjoying herself elsewhere.
Yeah, we did that a number of times. Yes.
Okay.
And she did prod me. She said, "No, if you're going to do it, because I'd be procrastinating and not working on it." And so
Sure.
she gave me a couple nudges to get it going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So why JR? I know you. I've always known you as Jeff.
Right.
When I was searching it in the catalog, I was like, Jeff Krull. I'm like, I can't find this book. So I had to look it up by your last name, and I was like, I see.
Okay, well, the book has a fair amount of, kind of grungy language in it, right?
Cursing.
Cursing,
Yeah.
yes. And even some other comments that probably. Okay, so I let my daughter take a look at it.
Okay.
Okay, and she well, I think it's good, but she says, don't you think that a lot of people kind of think of you as respectable? I said, well, I hope so. She says, well, you sure you want to put this out there? And so then I got to think, oh, gee, maybe I should be have a pseudonym.
Sure.
And I was thinking about a total different thing,
Uh-huh.
And we'll talk about the Mission Point Press a little bit later. But anyway, I got some feedback from them, and I said, "No, don't do that. No, you don't want a pseudonym.
A pen name?
Step up and take, be
yeah.
a man. You wrote it. Take credit for it." So anyway, I thought, well, okay, I will, but I'll just change it a little bit. I'll just make it kind of like J.D. Salinger. Okay. Maybe I'll
sound very official.
Be real famous. Yeah.
I took no offense to anything I read in the book.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
none of the words about
I think sometimes or at least I was overthinking a lot of stuff.
I would do the same thing.
Yeah, totally overthinking things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I understand. So how did you create the town names? You said you were trying to go for the BIG. Was that in mind first, or did you come up with the town names and then think, oh, that's big?
No, I think the Bell Island and Ganaway, the BIG, I thought of that. Those are the first two town names I came up with because I was trying to get away from the TNT. Okay?
Right.
So those are going to be the primary towns, the rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
And then the towns that these teams play, I'll have to come up with some more names.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, I just kind of tried to think, what sounds kind of upscale?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And what sounds kind of industrial, because I wanted to have both kinds of communities as opponents,
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept coming up with stuff, writing it down, rejecting things until I settled on a few names that sounded the way I wanted them to.
Okay.
Gave the impression I wanted them to do.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So your publisher is Mission Point Press out of Traverse City, Michigan. How did you get connected with them?
Well, after, as I'm writing this thing, I'm thinking, well, how do you publish it once you got it written? And I didn't think too much about it. I thought, well, let me get it written first, and then I'll worry about that. And after I was finished with it, first thing I did was I found this website called Query Tracker.
Okay.
It has literary agents.
Query Tracker. I'm going to write that down.
And you can put in what kind of a book you have, and it'll kind of feed back to you names of all these different agents. And you can click on an agent, and it'll show you what they want from you.
Okay.
Send me the first 3 chapters, give me a synopsis of you as the author, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I maybe found a dozen that wanted the same kind of thing, so I wouldn't have to make a separate application for each one.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So
smart.
I just cut and paste and put stuff in.
Uh-huh.
So I sent to these agents that I found on Query Tracker, And I think half of them replied, and the other half I didn't hear anything. And the ones that replied were, well, this is interesting, thank you, but it's really not what I'm looking for right now. So I said, well, all right, that's not going to work. And then I looked into, well, how do you self-publish something? And, you go to Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, Amazon, and if you want to mess around and format your thing, you can upload it yourself onto there.
Right.
But I don't have the tech know how to do that. So then I started looking for other self-publishers. I got online and started one of these things where you're having a text exchange.
Okay.
And this person hounded me for months. Hey, have you decided? We can help you with this, and I keep replying, no, I don't want somebody. I don't want what do they call it? A ghostwriter.
Yeah.
I just want somebody to help me.
Right.
I like what I've got.
World. Yeah.
Anyway, so Mission Point Press. There's a guy in town who passed away recently, John Schoaf, who's a pretty prominent family, and so I knew that I'm sort of friends with him. He had published a book that he wrote about Frank Lloyd Wright, and he had used this Mission Point Press, Traverse City, Michigan.
Okay.
And they call themselves a hybrid publisher.
Sure.
So it's pretty much self-publishing, but they do some promotion for you too. Anyway, that's what I decided to go with. I called the guy that John Schoaf had put me in touch with and explained what I was doing, and he said, well, send me a little bit, a couple chapters. And then he said, wait a minute, just send me the whole thing. So I emailed him the text, and he got back to me within about a week, and he said, I think it's good. He said, I read about 4 or 5 chapters and then skimmed the rest. He said, I don't think you need an editor.
Okay.
I don't think you need somebody like correct typos and grammar and stuff. But he said, I think you might want to have somebody do sort of a more of a content analysis, get feedback to you about the story.
Okay.
Not the technical stuff, but more.
Right.
So
making tweaks to the story, you mean?
Yeah, even just giving feedback, And what he did was he said, well, you've got you got some terminology in here that is a little, you're talking about, there's some racial references,
Oh, sure.
Because to be realistic, the town I grew up in was.
It was the
pretty,
60s. And
it was very segregated.
Yeah.
So anyway, that kind of feedback.
Okay.
And that cost you some money, but it was worthwhile. So made some changes, and then worked with them, and they formatted it, put it up on Amazon, and that was kind of that.
Okay. So if you had needed an editor, would they have provided it, or would you have had to go find your own editor?
They would have.
Okay.
They would charge you so much
Right.
per hour or per word, or I forget how they did that, but. Yeah, they would have done that. I did have the person that they assigned to me as kind of like the manager.
Okay.
And she helped with, like getting the cover.
Right.
She sent me several, pick one of these, and she wanted the blurbs and wanted to make sure I had a certain number of people reviewed it and
Okay.
handled all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then didn't really have to do much after that. She just took care of it.
Sounds streamlined.
Yeah.
The process.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the hardest part of writing the book?
I think there were kind of practical things that I found harder than I had imagined. For example, keeping track of what you have said.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes.
And who is related to whom? Who's this guy's sister?
Did you have a notes section somewhere that you were referring to?
Exactly. I did that, and I had it on my Word, another separate little document. For each main character, I wound up putting a little outline. Here's the character. This is the character's if the parents were even important. Here's who they are, here's the siblings, this is where the parent works, that kind of stuff.
Like a little family history.
Exactly, for each of the main characters. And then what I also found was necessary was to reread so many times what you had already written.
Uh-huh.
I put it
Really
aside
familiar
for a
with
few
it.
days or a week, and then get back to it. Okay, I'd have to make sure I was on the path again.
Sure.
So what I started doing was I made little chapter synopses for myself and put them at the beginning of each chapter. This is what's happening in this chapter.
Okay.
So I wouldn't have to read the whole chapter again.
That's smart.
Yeah. I mean, you would think.
Like a Cliff's Notes.
Yeah. You would think if you're writing the book, you'd know that. But
Yeah.
at least in my case, I was finding there was so much floating around in my head that I needed that.
I've written
help.
some stories where I realized halfway through I changed the person's name.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
I was like, are you serious? That's
Right.
not the name I started off with. How did I make that change? It wasn't even close.
Yeah.
So
No,
I get it.
That's very true.
So did you find any part of writing it energizing?
Yeah, I did. I as it evolved and as I started to get what looked like it was going to be an actual book, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of hard work, but it was also fun. So I enjoyed doing it. I don't know if we'll talk about sequels later, but
If you were energized enough for that.
yeah, right.
Is there anything you would do differently writing another book, or if you put something else into the world?
I think I learned a lot about my own approach to it, and if I had to do it again, I don't know that I would change much. I think, I learned some things like with these outlines and
Right.
chapter synopses that were helpful, and I'd do that kind of thing again. I did a fair amount of Googling as I went through it, just to
Yeah.
get what other authors do, and it seems like there's so many different ways that people write books,
Yeah.
different methodology, and I did learn the terms pantser,
Yes.
was you're writing by the seat of your pants.
Or plotter. Is that the other one?
There's
Pantser or plotter?
pantser, and I forget the other one, but I'm not a pantser. It was more of I wanted to structure it. I wanted to know where it was going. But some people don't write that way. They just wing it and keep on going. So
Yeah. Free write it and then see what happens. I don't know.
I guess.
Yeah. So with some of these descriptions of the factories and the jobs the men did there, did you have that knowledge previously, or was that some stuff you had to do a deep dive into?
That stuff actually I did, and my friends too, worked those jobs.
You worked. Oh, my word.
Yeah.
Some of them sounded dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was those are the times when there wasn't a whole lot of, I don't know if the environmental protection or whatever it was, is it EPA?
Yeah.
I don't know if that even existed, but there were a lot of problems, and I think we probably worked those jobs as summer jobs after high school.
Okay.
That's why I don't think as high school kids we did those.
Okay.
You had to be probably 18 years old to do it. But the one that's described in there where the injury takes place, I worked that job. It was at a chemical company called Durez Plastics, and they made resin. And they had these big, huge kettles, and they'd mix up this goo. It was red, and you would have to get underneath the bottom of it. They'd open it up, and the stuff would start coming out. And you'd put a shovel into there, and you'd curl it on there, and you'd run back out onto the floor, and you'd stomp on it. Because if you didn't stomp it out flat, it would explode.
Oh, my word.
And it was
So you're stomping on stuff that might explode? That doesn't...
yeah. So you got to flatten in these big patties. Then, and this is part of the book. After the kettle cooled down a little bit, you had to climb inside of it. It was probably about 7 feet in diameter, and this resin would be dried onto the inside of the kettle. So you go in there with a chisel, and you'd scrape it off so you didn't lose any of it.
What were you doing with it?
It was falling out the bottom of the kettle.
But what was the ultimate goal with this resin that you're stomping on?
Okay, the stomping resin, it would be these big patties, and then after it dried out, then you'd take a sledgehammer and smash it up into chunks. Then you'd shovel the chunks into these big drums, and off it would go. And they did something with it.
Oh, gotcha.
God knows
okay.
what. But I mean, it had to do with making plastic.
I feel like you probably need you needed medical attention back then or something, like physical or something after that job.
Anybody who ever worked in that place, including me, has free annual medical checkups because so much contamination in there. There was asbestos floating around everywhere.
Oh, okay.
And then also, climbing into these kettles without any kind of oxygen, you're breathing all this stuff. So that was another reason I thought it'd be fun to write the book, because just to kind of tell the story of all that crazy stuff.
Oh, I know. It's amazing what people do for jobs.
Yeah, and that was like, you work those jobs and then you want to make sure you go back to college.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And the guys would tell you that. Yeah, you go to college, you want to spend your life doing this.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I feel thankful that you're sitting across from me right now. So if you wrote another book, what would it be about? I mean, there are some unanswered questions at the end of this book, so there could be a sequel, but, I mean, would you want to do a sequel?
Well, I gave people have asked me that a lot because there are these loose ends, and that in fact that was a big decision I had to make. Am I going to try to wrap everything up?
Right.
Which would be probably good if you could, but it had gotten pretty long, and I thought I don't think I can realistically resolve all these threads.
Sure.
If you resolve them in the next 50 pages, it would be unrealistic.
Right.
So I decided this is okay. Life goes on. This is what you know at this point. It's over.
Yeah.
But people ask me that, and I decided finally I would try it. In fact, I did write one.
You did? You wrote a follow-up?
Yeah, but I haven't done anything with it.
How many pages is it?
It's about the same as that.
Oh, well, that's fascinating. So you're just not sure what you're going to... So this is breaking news.
I guess it is, but
you're just not sure if you're going to actually
put it out there. I don't think I like it. I mean, I like some parts of it, but I don't know if it would be a satisfying sequel for people who are telling me I should do a sequel.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
I take the guys in the book and I give them one last high school adventure, trip to Florida, which is another thing our friends did.
Yeah.
Spring break.
Uh-huh. That sounds fun.
And then it's kind of like a bit of a leap ahead. Well, we've kept in touch, and but then all of a sudden we're old guys. And, well, heaven, what do you know? We're in Florida. A lot of us are in Florida. We're coming down to Florida. And then a new guy shows up.
An interloper.
Who happens to be from the old hometown.
Oh.
And he's a little bit of a strange, he's not revealing too many things. So there's some good parts of it.
Uh-huh.
But, yeah, I don't know. I might work on it some more.
Yeah, we might see something then, huh?
Maybe. I don't know.
So are you still in touch with all 6 guys from the book?
Well, 2 of them are no longer with us.
Okay.
And actually, that was the thing I thought about in the sequel, whether I should kill off 2 of them, because that was what happened.
That's what happened?
But my wife said, no, if you're going to write a sequel, everybody's got to be in it. So, okay.
Noted.
But, yeah, we're still in touch. The real guys, they did have nicknames, like in the book, but one guy was called, we had 2 guys who were second cousins.
Okay.
One was they're both named Guido, last name.
Okay.
Jim and Jeff. Our assistant coach on the varsity team, got sick of calling Guido and having them both.
Sure.
So he says, all right, you're Jones and you're Gazelle. And that was it. From that point on, we got Jones and we got
I
Gazelle.
wonder what the thinking was behind
Who
that.
knows? I mean, it's just crazy. So, but I don't have that in the book. But
Yeah.
in the book we make names up out of initials and things.
Okay.
And one guy's name is Tyler Barrett.
This is in the book?
Yeah, TB. And they say, well, what are we going to call him? It was Tyler L. Barrett. Oh, the little bastard. No, we'll call him TB. What's TB? Tuberculosis. What's tuberculosis? That's a scourge. Okay, we'll call him Scourge.
So you're making all these leaps.
Yeah. So that's one of the characters in the book is
I
called
do remember
Scourge.
that now that
Yeah.
you say that.
So and that's yeah. So
A
sort of
peek
like
into how you gave them the nicknames.
exactly right.
So, do you have any advice for writers working on their first book?
Oh boy. Well, I tell you what, I gave a talk in the old hometown was it last summer, and one of the guys who came to the talk went to our high school, but he was younger than me. I was class of '66. This guy was class of '73.
Okay.
He came up to me afterward and he said, "Hey, would you mind if I give you a call?" Sure. He says, "Well, I got some ideas. I'm thinking about writing something." And turns out he was a prosecuting attorney in New Jersey after high school and college, and he wanted to write more of a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was hesitant. He didn't know if he could do it. So the only advice I gave him was, "Look, just sit down and start trying.
Right.
You know, get something on paper."
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel comfortable, show it to some people, get some feedback, and just do it.
Yeah.
And then so we talked as he wrote this out. He sent me some chapters, and I give him some feedback. And now he's got a book published.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And he used Mission Point Press.
I like it.
Yeah.
So we're going to move into some fun questions now.
All right.
Okay. So how long did you play football?
Okay. I played freshman football in high school, then sophomore year, junior varsity, and junior year was junior varsity too for me.
Mm-hmm.
Same with several of the guys. Now, the guys in the book all play football. The real friends, not all of them played football. Most of them did, but not all of them.
Okay.
So anyway, I played freshman football, junior varsity, and then junior year moved up to the varsity.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And then I was going to be the starting quarterback my senior year. But for one thing, my father died that summer before my senior year. And then I had a ruptured appendix.
Oh.
So my poor mother. You know.
Yeah, that was a rough time for your mom,
Yeah.
for sure.
Anyway, I really didn't get to play much because of the appendix recovery. I was just recovering from it.
Sure.
But anyway, that was my football. Freshman year, I played basketball in the winter, and then JV basketball, and then varsity basketball.
Okay.
And then I did track probably more than you want to know.
You did a lot. You were busy.
Most of these guys did 2 or 3 sports.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then I went off to college, and I hadn't played enough high school football because of this appendix thing. So I was looking for some college that would be maybe a possibility that I could play.
Yeah.
And I went to a small all-men's college and played a couple of years.
Oh, you played football in college?
2 years. Yeah.
Were you a quarterback?
No, because I had never really started as a quarterback in high school.
Right.
So I'll play anything.
Played
just
wherever.
Put me in there. I wound up being a
Put me in,
defensive
coach.
end. Yeah. Right.
So, okay, we're going to change directions a little bit. So who is your favorite author or authors these days?
Oh, these days. Oh, wow. I got to write down things I read because I forget them as soon as I read them.
Okay.
I think one of my favorites though is Eric Larson. He writes these books about history, nonfiction stuff. Yeah. I guess I tend to gravitate more toward nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read novels that somebody else suggests to me. Lately, I've been kind of going back to reread some of the classics.
Yeah.
Once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
just to see what I think of them now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I read Moby Dick.
Oh,
And
they call me Ishmael. That's all I can.
that's about as far as, yeah, no, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, okay, these books have been classics. They've been
I know.
touted for generations. Are they really any good?
Sometimes I feel like I'm missing something because I'm like, this is a classic.
I know. I feel that way too. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I do that and
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
So if you could spend the day with one person, living or dead, who would you pick?
Oh, man.
They can be famous, not famous.
Okay. How about Bob Dylan?
Yeah.
We were big Dylan fans
Mhm.
in high school.
Wonder if he'd have much to say.
I don't think so.
He seems so quiet.
Yeah, I'd like to try to figure out what's with him. You know, I mean, we
You
always
and a lot of other people.
yeah. And we always thought that some of his stuff, had a little depth to it, but we just loved his crazy rhyming stuff that didn't really make much sense at all. But the it was catchy, the music.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of made. He was a big, one of our big favorites, but we made a lot of fun of him too.
So if your book were made into a movie, who would star in it?
Problem with that is I just don't have a clue as to who younger
People
actors are.
Mhm. Sure.
I'd have to get some expert and say, okay, I can explain to you what these characters are, what kind of a person I'd like to play this character, but who it would be, man, I just totally clueless.
Let somebody else pick for you, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
If you were starting your life now, what career would you pick?
Well, I tried a couple careers before I got into the library biz. My first one was with New England Telephone Company, which was kind of, got a job offer after college, needed a job. And
Were you an operator?
no, but I was in charge of operators.
Oh.
And this is one of the things that annoyed the heck out of me about this company. They hired me as what they called a traffic manager. And I was in Vermont. I had the southern half of the state. I had 7 offices I didn't know anything. Each office was managed by a chief operator, all women.
Mm-hmm.
They have to call me Mr. Krull. I'm the boss. They got to call me that. And of course, I call them, Luana or Gina or whatever. The second person in the management level was a group chief operator. Chief operator, group chief operator. The group chief operators were all women too. And they were hired out of college, like me.
Uh-huh.
I was hired as the manager. They're hired as a group chief operator.
Mm-hmm.
In one of the offices, there was a young woman, my same class as me, class of 1970, from Vassar College. And I said, doesn't this really irk you?
Mm-hmm.
She says, yeah, it sure does, but what are you going to do?
Right.
So the company was totally, I guess almost everything was then, sexist like that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I went on a business trip one time with my boss and his boss. We were going around to different offices, staying in pretty nice places and having nice dinners, explaining to the peons why we were having a budget crunch. And one night after dinner, we went back to the hotel room of the boss's boss, and I sounded off too much about what I thought about that stuff. And that was the end of my phone company.
Days.
Yeah, I didn't last too long after that. Then what I thought I really wanted to do was be a teacher. And after the phone company, I did teach for a year at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg Academy.
Okay.
And that was a disaster. I mean, it was a really hard job. I had no idea what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And, kind of washed out on that one, too.
Mm-hmm.
But because I spent so much time at the Pennsylvania State Library trying to prepare some kind of lessons for the next day,
Oh, sure.
I got to know some of the librarians a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they were great. I mean, they'd run off and get me all kinds of information for my class.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I think I'd like to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's what shifted me over to librarianship.
So you'd pick it again.
I think I would. But I mean, I say that not knowing what it's really like now because I've been out of it for 10 years. So I'd have to sit down with you and ask some probing questions
Right.
before I made a commitment.
Got to be good at computers. So
Okay,
there's
I
still
guess
some
I
reference.
might be
but
looking for another career path.
Another
then.
career, huh?
Yeah.
So last but not least, if a fan wanted to get in touch with you, how could they reach you?
Well, should I give you my email address or what?
Yeah.
Or,
If that's the best way for it, sure.
yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook, but I don't do much anymore.
Right.
I did for a while when I first retired.
Mm-hmm.
I posted stuff, and I was getting kind of annoying, so
You backed off of
I
Facebook.
was encouraged to back off, so I have backed off. But yeah, my email address is jkrull48@gmail.com.
Okay.
And so feel free to send me an email.
Okay, great. Well, Jeff, thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices today.
It's been fun. I've really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure having you here. And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more authors on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices, a source for local authors and their stories. From the studios of Access Fort Wayne at the Allen County Public Library in downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm your host, Meg Bell. A special thank you to Kay Gregg for her work engineering and editing this episode. We've explored fascinating stories and insightful discussions today, but our journey doesn't end here. Find more episodes of Pages and Voices wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends and family. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with the area's authors and their insights into the written word. Until next time, keep turning the pages, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.